Hello everybody, today I'm going to make another video just to practice the speech I'm going to make at Toastmasters. Today I'm going to tell you how to buy a pair of good walking or running shoes. So in running, there's a theory called forefoot running. The forefoot is the part of the foot, the half of the foot towards the toes. And everybody feel free to jump right now, and when you land, pay attention to what part of your foot you land on. Chances are you landed on your forefoot, also called the ball of the foot. Notice that your toes are able to bend. If you land on your forefoot, your body's going to absorb the shock better. Try jumping and landing on your ankles. If you land on your ankles, it's going to hurt more. And this is evidence that when you run, you should land on your forefoot. But if it would be the case that if you could run barefoot, right at the moment that your forefoot hits the ground, there's going to be a certain space between your ankle and the ground, and whatever that space is, if that amount of distance is less than the difference in thickness on the sole of a typical running shoe between the ankle part and the part under the toes, then it would be the case that the extra thickness on the sole of a typical running shoe would force your foot to bang into the ground too soon, and that's going to increase your chances of injury. Most running shoes have the sole just under a half an inch or 12 millimeters thicker than the part under the toes. There are a few shoes that have a lower drop. There are a few shoes that tell you the drop. The drop is the difference in thickness between the part of the sole under the ankle and the part of the sole under the toes. Most shoes do not tell you what the drop is. These shoes are supposed to be completely flat, and they say zero drop. That's just possibly a marketing term for a shoe that's completely flat soled. And they also say foot shape. That means that they're not labeled as being wide width, but the part on the forefoot is wider than on an average shoe, and when your foot hits the ground, it spreads a little bit, and if your feet are pressing tightly against the sides of the shoe, then when your feet spread, it's going to cause some discomfort, and so you want the shoe to be a little bit wider to accommodate when your feet spread. Now let's consider walking. Everybody take a step forward, but go in really slow motion, and pay very much attention to when your forward foot hits the ground. Stop, pause when your forward foot hits the ground, and you'll notice that your ankle is hitting the ground first. In walking, your ankle probably should hit the ground first. But so let's think about the sole of a shoe. In general, the sole should probably have these three characteristics. It should be flat, flexible, and thick enough to protect your feet from the ground. And the purpose of the sole of a shoe is to protect your feet from the ground, and the purpose of the upper part of the shoe is to protect your feet from the environment and to strap the sole onto your foot. So let's go over those three characteristics of the sole of a shoe. So let's look at flat. So there is such a thing as high-heeled shoes, and I don't understand why they exist, but high-heeled shoes look like they're uncomfortable. They look like they're difficult to balance in. I'm vaguely aware that some women think there's some kind of sexual fetish or some kind of a titillation or interest about these shoes. I don't understand why they exist. And I'm going to assume that when you're standing, if you're barefoot and you're standing, your weight is going to be evenly distributed between your ankle and your forefoot, but as the heel of a shoe gets higher and higher, greater than half of your weight is going to be on your forefoot or on your toes, and that's going to probably cause some kind of harm or damage. There's two bone deformities that could happen if you wear badly fitting shoes. The first is hammer toe. Hammer toe is when your feet are curled inside of a shoe because there's not enough room for your toes to spread out. And then when you take your shoes off, you can't uncurl your toes because your foot's been so deformed that your feet are messed up, and I don't know what the cure is, and the cure is beyond the scope of my speech. There's another bone deformity called, not hammer toe, but a bunion. A bunion is when the bone in the ball of your foot is sticking out. So there should be a straight line between your ankle and from your ankle to your big toe on the inside edge of your feet. But from the viewpoint of your own head, on your right hand foot, if you have a bunion, your big toe will be pointed toward your right hand side, and your toes will all be pointed to your right hand side. And from the viewpoint of your own head, on your left hand side, the opposite, your big toe on your left foot will be pointed toward your left. And in order to help you walk, your toes really should be pointed straight ahead. And the cure for a bunion is beyond the scope of my speech. Bunions may possibly be caused by wearing shoes that are too narrow. A lot of shoes are physically narrower than the shape of a human foot. I don't know why this should be the case. I went over flat, now flexible. Now everybody feel free to take a step forward, but go in slow motion and stop just as your forward foot is hitting the ground, and notice that on your back, as your forward foot is getting closer and closer to the ground, your back foot will be lifting off the ground. At first your ankle lifts off the ground, and then your toes will lift off the ground, but your toes will bend before your foot finally lifts off the ground. And that's good, that's normal, that's the way people walk. And in order to help you walk, your shoes should be reasonably flexible, not like so flexible that they're too flimsy, but if you're going to do a lot of walking, you probably don't want to walk around in a pair of hard-soled dress shoes. Flat, flexible, and then thick enough to protect your feet against the ground. Most shoes are probably thick enough to protect your feet from the ground, but there is such thing as minimalist shoes. I don't fully understand why they exist, but I've heard that some people think that shoes are bad for you, or they hurt your feet more than they help you. I'm going to guess that a good fitting shoe is better than going around barefoot. Most shoes should be thick enough, but just I have seen some shoes that, especially women's shoes, that appear to be slip-on and extremely flimsy, and those don't look too much like good walking shoes to me. And then finally, I'll tell you about the laces on shoes. So a good pair of walking shoes probably has 28 holes, 14 holes on each shoe, and they should be in rows of 7. The rows should be going the length of the shoe, and the 2 holes that are closest to the ankle will be closer together than the rest of the holes. And this is so that you can do this lace lock. And you notice carefully the shoes, and when you do the lace lock like this, then after the lace lock is partially in place, after you put the shoe on, you pull the laces and rock them back and forth like you see here, and then that is going to help inhibit the shoe from slipping up and down. So I hope this was helpful, and that's all I have to say for today.